Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay.
My name is Elyse, and I am a sophomore at Miami University studying the Introduction to Appalachia. And we are going to put on an interview. And Allison, feel free to introduce yourself.
My name is Allison Douthat. I am a fourth year student at UC. I'm studying architectural engineering.
So Allison is my brother's girlfriend, and when we were asked to find someone who is from Appalachia, she was my first thought. She is from Portsmouth. So we'll go ahead and get started with the questions. Number one, when and where were you born?
I was born on January 24th, 2000, actually in Cincinnati, Ohio.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Portsmouth, Ohio, which is about 2 hours from Cincinnati.
And what was it like growing up there? If you can think of any like stories or details, just of your childhood growing up in Portsmouth.
Yeah, I say it all the time, but honestly, I loved my childhood. I loved growing up in Portsmouth, just because I was really close with my family, especially my extended family, and I have a lot of family friends there. And I would spend a lot of time outside, running around in my neighborhood, and I have a lot of traditions with my family and family friends. To name one would be we would always go camping a little bit outside of my hometown on Memorial Day and or like Memorial Day weekend and Halloween weekend. And that was like Disney World to us. Like we would much rather have gone camping than like go to Disney World. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Alrighty. What were some of your favorite things to do? I know you just mentioned camping, and that was a lot of fun playing outside and everything. Was there anything else that was just something that you loved to do?
Sorry. Oh no, cut out just a little, but I would say just like on a daily basis, I love to go fishing with my dad. And then when I got a little bit older, I would just go fishing by myself because I grew up near a pond. And then I would play in the creek near my house a lot too. And I would always ride bikes or a scooter in my neighborhood with my neighbors too.
Awesome. Do you think that all of the outdoor activities that you grew up around and doing is based off of like the geography of where you lived? Because I didn't have that same experience. I mean, I played outside, but we didn't go camping a lot. I fished
Right.
once. So our childhoods were different. And I wonder if it has to do with me growing up in Fairfield versus you growing up over in Portsmouth.
I think definitely. I think I didn't realize that until I came to Cincinnati and started going to UC and like talking to, people from all different backgrounds. And then I realized like, I know people who have never gone camping in their life and have like no desire to. And that just blows my mind because that's like, I would spend all day, every day outside. And it's just like, I lived in kind of like an I wouldn't say open neighborhood, but like not a lot of traffic. So like my mom totally trusted us to just run around our neighborhood and like knew that we were going to be totally safe.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just like a lot of open land, I'm sure. And it's not like living in the city of Cincinnati.
Yeah, definitely.
So where are your parents' families from?
So my dad's parents are just from Portsmouth. And they lived like basically in the heart of Portsmouth. And then my mom's parents are from West Portsmouth, and we call that the West Side.
Okay, interesting. I didn't know that they were both from Portsmouth, so you're like diehard Portsmouth now.
Yeah, I think even their grandparents were also from Portsmouth as well. So.
Oh, okay. So
It's like a lot of generations from Portsmouth.
That's awesome. Um, so obviously you've been there and you told us what it was like. Um, have your parents or grandparents ever told you about what things were like there when they were growing up or when they were young adults, kind of before you arrived into the world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say I'm like more familiar with stories from my parents. My dad, he grew up more from like a poor family. Um, but I feel like our childhoods were very similar because he would always talk about how like he loved his neighborhood as a kid and like he would just play with his neighbors all the time. Same kind of situation where like he would just run around and like his mom, my grandma never had to check up on him.
Yeah.
And then my mom's side, my mom lived in Portsmouth, but then her dad bought a farm on the west side and they would go out there all the time and she would talk about how like they all her and her sisters would have to help out on the farm and they do all the dirty work.
Yeah.
um, but I think that they both really enjoyed their childhoods from what I can tell.
Yeah. It sounds like it. Um, did you or your parents ever use words like Appalachian or mountain people to describe yourselves? Or even, I guess, people that like neighbors and people you knew growing up from Portsmouth. Was that ever like a comment in any of your conversations or a term that was used to
I feel
describe
like
people?
I feel like if I'm talking to just someone from Portsmouth, we wouldn't just like describe ourselves as that. But I feel like now that I'm in Cincinnati and I'll tell people where I'm from and they look at me like I'm crazy, they've never heard of it, I'll bring up that I'm from Appalachia or just say, like, it's kind of like not really near any major cities. And I'll try to like describe the geography of it.
Awesome. I think that's a great way to kind of at least get a conversation started right off the
Mhm.
bat about Appalachia is geography, because I think that's what most people think of first if they're not from Appalachia is the geography,
Right.
the mountains and everything, rather
Yeah,
than the culture
definitely.
and the history. At
Mhm.
least for me, that's how it was.
Yeah.
Um, and how do you feel that your upbringing has helped you become who you are? And what does it mean to you to be an Appalachian? So, kind of two questions that you can feel free to answer.
Mhm. Um, I would say because of my upbringing, I definitely enjoy a more simple lifestyle. I didn't really realize that until just actually recently when I was driving home, probably like a couple months ago, like growing up like in your teenage years, you're just like so ready to leave home. And that's what I feel like a lot of people will say that in my hometown, like you need to get out of here because it's pretty drug ridden. So um I remember like when as a teenager, I was really excited to just get away. But then now that when I visit home, I'm kind of like, I get a little emotional coming home because I'm just like, man, it's just so much more simple here. Like, I just love being surrounded by the hills and, all of the green, all the trees and grass and like open spaces. So I think I definitely enjoy, being outside. I've always loved camping and I still continue to camp all the time and love to travel. And I don't really care as much about like materialistic things, I guess. Like I don't care to own like expensive brands or
Yeah.
I guess like I see that a lot in like um a lot of like the girls around here. And then to be an Appalachian, I think it's just sharing like a common love for the place that you're from, and like the landscape that you're surrounded by. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah. Just kind of making peace with your surroundings. I
Yeah,
definitely feel
definitely.
like, at least from what I've learned so far in the semester, you kind of hit it like head on with a really good description and like what I would expect to hear. Um, I do want to get back when you mentioned it was kind of drug ridden. I do want to get back to that. I have a question later on if I remember to ask you. So, but moving on for now, who else would you say can be Appalachian? Is it like based off of your family's history, your culture, the way you view the geography you live in, the state you're from, that sort of thing? What would you say constitutes a person as Appalachian?
I feel like thinking of like dictionary definition, and they talk about how it's like a person from the Midwest, and they have like a whole map of like who's considered Appalachian. You could constitute it as that, but I think to me, it's just someone who has a respect for living in the Midwest, and loving the mountains here too.
Yeah.
And then also appreciating the history, like you said.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And how do you define Appalachia as a place, and why do you define it this way?
I would say it's an area in the Midwest, typically surrounded by mountains, and you'll find a lot of small towns. I think in a lot of areas, there can be a lot of poverty. And I think recently a lot of towns have been struck by the like opioid crisis and, heroin and like other really like life-threatening drugs. But I would say in comparison to cities, there's, not much to do aside from just like appreciating the outdoors. Like growing up, I didn't have a mall. It would always like shock people. Like I would have to drive like an hour to go to the nearest mall, and it definitely didn't have all the stores that like Cincinnati has here. And then why I chose this definition, I think just because that's, what I grew up seeing as far as like drugs. But like, I think I had a great childhood. But some people in my hometown have kind of allowed drugs and poverty to take over their life. I was just one of like the lucky people to, not let that take over and control my life.
Right.
So I'll appreciate where I was from.
Awesome. Let's see here. What are some strengths or opportunities of Appalachia or Appalachian identity? The positive side.
Yeah, I would say some strengths. I feel like we're definitely more like handymen or women, however you prefer. And this might be silly, but I think that we might have better like survival instincts, just going off of like what I said earlier, how like some people have never camped. I think that like if people had to, depend only on the land, that would be challenging for a lot of people. But for the people in my hometown, I don't think it would be so bad. But I can't speak for all of the people in my hometown. Obviously, everybody had different upbringings. But,
yeah. So it's kind of like, you've never been to a big city before because you're from Portsmouth or something. And they expect you to ride the L and just know exactly where to get on and get off and how to operate all of that. It's kind of that, but the opposite.
Yeah.
So
that's true. Like a very, almost opposite perspective, like trying to take a person from the country and put them in the city.
Yeah, I think I'd rather have better instincts when it comes to outdoors than know how to get around the city.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, and what are some challenges for Appalachia or Appalachians?
I would say definitely education. I don't think it's really a secret that we lack a lot of educational resources. And I think we can kind of be blind to that. I know growing up, like I felt like I was receiving a pretty good education, and I did really well in high school. I took college classes during my senior year of high school, almost an entire like full schedule of college classes. So when I was coming to UC, I wasn't really nervous. I thought, I'm pretty well prepared for this. I think I can handle this. And I worked hard. It wasn't like it was just like all coming to me naturally and I didn't have to work for my grades. But when I got to UC, I definitely got a little bit of a reality check, because I struggled in my classes for the first time ever. And, that's kind of hard to accept. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized, I think I just was at a disadvantage when it comes to my education. But and also I would say grammar, when it like specifically education, grammar, I feel like we're kind of viewed like we're not smart just because of the way that we talk. Because there are a lot of very bright people from Appalachia, but we kind of get discredited because of the way that we talk or the accent that we have.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair to say, but so you mentioned education and poverty and like the opioid crisis. Do you think that those are all related in some way? And if so, why do you think it's more, or it seems to be more prominent? I don't know the exact numbers. I know that in Appalachia there are a lot of fatal deaths due to drug addiction. And a lot of times I think that also is directly correlated to growing up in poverty and not having the resources for education and all of that. Do you think that that's like, or do you have any kind of idea as to why that is seen more in Appalachia?
Yeah, I would say from like an educational standpoint, people, I would say like, probably a little bit before my time, because now it's more common for like everybody to grow up going through school. But I'd say like back in the day, a lot of families from Appalachia had farms, or, they were growing some sort of crop at their house. And I think they didn't really care for education. Like they didn't really have the time to go through and have a full like school education because they needed to make means to live. So they were more focused on just like, starting young, like you're working on the farm, things like that.
Right.
And then I don't know exactly like the history of like how drugs came through our area, but I think it also comes back to like what I said earlier, where there's just not a lot to do. And it's just like some people maybe are growing up in poverty and they can't figure out how to get out of it, because like we are surrounded by a lot of small towns, like I said, and there's not a lot of like huge opportunities to get out. And so when you're growing up in poverty and you feel like there's no escape and there are drugs present in a town and you get a hold of it, I think it's very easy for people to get addicted.
Right.
And hard for them to get away from that.
Definitely. Especially if they, kind of remain in that same small area that's kind of surrounded by, I don't want to say nothingness, because I mean, it's a lot of like your hometown, I'm pretty sure is surrounded
but it's
beautiful scenery.
But it's isolated too. Yeah. It's especially because of our geography and the way that we're kind of tucked away in the mountains. It is isolated, and it's not nothingness, but
right. I mean nothingness as in like like an opportunity at like a job in the city or something, because you have to have resources to get there, and is that even worth it if you have to commute every day? It's a long drive, that whole sort of thing. I think can be like kind of hard for some people, especially when there's poverty involved and kind of just that whole scene. Um,
Yeah.
so going back to what I wanted to mention earlier,
Mhm.
for a different assignment for this class, actually, I read this book. It's called When These Mountains Burn. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's by David Joy. And I thought it was really interesting. It's about like 2016 year, maybe like give or take a few months on either end. And I know we were both in high school in 2016. Were you in
Yeah.
high school? I think so. And so
Mhm.
um, it was just talking a lot about like the amount of drugs, and that's kind of like where I was really curious because I didn't know that about Appalachia, and I've known you for years now, and like I didn't
Mhm.
never really put two and two together that Portsmouth is Appalachia, and just to hear you kind of confirm a few things that I've learned so far. Um, Obviously, I'm no genius on this, but it's been really interesting to hear your experiences and all of that.
Yeah.
I feel like I know a little bit more, well, a lot more about you, and I'm interested to talk more about this.
Yeah.
But do you have any questions about this interview before we close the video?
Um, do you know if do you show these interviews in your class or
Yeah, so we have an option to put it on a website, and
okay.
that's where that release form came in.
Yeah,
Um,
I saw that.
yeah, and so they have like other people who have done similar interviews, and we'll just kind of upload it there, and so that other people can kind of watch and learn a little bit more and kind of become more aware of their friends and family and people around them that they might not realize that they are from Appalachia, and it could start a really cool conversation like what we just had.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, and then we'll do a presentation in class and just kind of talk about what we learned, and I'll write a paper about this, and I'm pretty excited. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
That's
asking.
great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining this. I know you're really busy tonight, so I appreciate you giving me some of your time, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this next time we see each other, which would be cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I'm really glad that we had this conversation because it's nice to have someone ask about, my upbringing and kind of my culture. So
Yeah,
I'm glad that you enjoyed it too.
yeah, definitely. Well,
Yeah.
I hope you have a great night, and thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, bye.
Bye.